Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more Gnosis. Today we are diving back into the works of Rudolph Steiner. This is Christianity as a Mystical Fact. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It's not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of Christianity as a Mystical Fact with Chapter 3, The Greek Sages Before Plato in the Light of the Wisdom of the Mysteries. Numerous facts combine to show us that the philosophical wisdom of the Greeks rested on the same mental basis as mystical knowledge. We only understand the great philosophers when we approach them with feelings gained through the study of the mysteries. With what veneration does Plato speak of the secret doctrines in the Phaedo? We have not done Phaedo yet. That is probably going to be on the list here shortly. I have done several of the works of Plato. You are more than welcome to check them out in the Ancient Lore playlist. And it almost seems, says he, as though those who have appointed the initiations for us are not at all ordinary people, but that for a long time they have been enjoining upon us that anyone who reaches Hades without being initiated and sanctified falls into the mire, but that he who is purified and consecrated when he arrives dwells with the gods. For those who have to do with initiations say that there are many thyrsus bearers, but few really inspired. These latter are, in my opinion, none other than those who have devoted themselves in the right way to wisdom. I myself have not missed the opportunity of becoming one of these as far as I was able, but have striven after it in every way. I do have a little bit to add to this now. There is a key to knowledge that has just been dropped in this that almost everybody is going to miss. Where he says right here, it almost seems as though those who have appointed the initiations for us are not at all ordinary people. I believe that. There are these things that I like to call entities. Now, you probably believe in the entities in one way or another. You may call them angels. You may call them demons. You may call them aliens or genies or spirits or forces or something along those lines. I believe that these things are real. They have the ability to see forward and backward in time and to understand what that means. And some of them are aligned for the betterment of humankind, while some of them are aligned for the detriment of humankind. These entities appear to feed upon energy. They feed upon fear and lust and the vices, but they also feed upon the virtues too. It depends on which particular entity you are working with. It is entirely possible, although it will never be a confirmation, that these initiations were put in place by these entities. My opinion is that it was probably put in place by the entities not aligned with the betterment of humankind, because while you may find wisdom in this, it tells you something right here as well. For those who have to do with initiations say that there are many thyrsus bearers. That means there are many people who were initiated, but few really inspired. That is, very few actually find the path after the initiation. That is because the initiation is initiating you into a belief system that is fundamentally flawed. You are not in a prison planet. You are not in an illusion. You are here incorporated by the direct express will of the Lord God Almighty, the creator of heaven and earth, the sustainer of all life everywhere. He has put you here intentionally. Therefore, it is not a prison. It is not, you are here to learn lessons, and some of those lessons suck, but most of them don't. Most of life is rather enjoyable if you have the right mindset. And so many people can be initiated, but not many people will actually understand the greater illumination that comes from the practices that come from this. Because just like with Christianity, where people walk down the aisle and they say the prayer and they feel like they're fine, and they go to work the next day and they lie to their clients, or they cheat on their wife, or they do whatever things are sinful to their own mind, even, right? They believe that drinking is a sin, and yet they do it, even though they walk down that aisle and they said that prayer, right? Many people are called, very few are chosen. It is the exact same here, right? Now, if the control system of religion is what I think, something designed to keep you from fully realizing your full potential, see my book, these things are put in place to make you automatically reject the things that are actually going to bring you the true knowledge of existence. It is intrinsic to the Bible that if you doubt in any way, you are automatically condemned to hell. That is one of the intrinsic things, right? Well, if you're doubting, then your faith just isn't enough, and that's obviously Satan's influence. Even though there are very, very valid reasons to doubt both the Old and the New Testament. Very few actually attain the wisdom, and these initiations is another form of a control system in the exact same way that Catholicism was, and the way that many of the Protestant systems are set up. Well, pretty much all of them. Religion in general seems to be a control system designed to keep you from reaching your full potential, because there are things that you can do, and you are told that if you do them, you are condemned to hell, even though most of the patriarchs definitely participated in some of those activities. And so, for this, I believe that these initiations were put there, once again, to keep you from achieving what you were meant to achieve, much like the Masons, right? We've dealt with the Masons and what they believe. I think it was from Rudolph Steiner. It's in the playlist. They do ceremonial magic, but they don't believe in ceremonial magic. So they are going through these rituals and doing these things, aligning themselves with an entity without the full belief in that entity. And so, because they have aligned themselves with this particular entity, that entity can feed upon their emotions, right? Sometimes that can be a beneficial thing if you are with the correct entity, but the correct entities are not going to trick you into aligning yourself with them. They will actually, and I say this without full knowledge because I do not have the entities in my intimate, right? I don't talk to them. I have invited, but I have not received any. Some of them are aligned with the detriment of humankind, and they are allowed to deceive you into walking away from your full power, right? You have to willingly choose that, and these initiations probably are that. You can tell by the fruit that comes from it. And I wanted to point that out because this is telling you that, right? This is telling you that they have not devoted themselves in the right way to wisdom, but they're initiated, they're part of the club, they're going through the procedures, but they have not devoted themselves in the right way. Now, what I tell you here is I have devoted myself. I have achieved some things. I have healed myself with a cyst in my throat. I have healed my shoulder. I'm in the process of healing my back and my currently broken leg. These are things that I can do because I have devoted myself in the right way. I tell you all of the time, the only difference between what I can do and you is the fact that I have devoted myself. I do the prayers, I do the fasting, and I do the meditation. I sit and work with it. Most people won't. That is, again, what it is telling you here. We have initiated you into this process. You have these things, but you still don't have the understanding. Well, why are you in the club? If you don't have the understanding, if you are not devoting yourself in the correct way, how are you still part of the club? That is because the club is not really there to give you wisdom. It is there to make you think that you are getting wisdom. It is there to convince you you live in an illusion. It is there to convince you you are on a prison planet. This is a simulation. You are supposed to overcome the world. No, you are supposed to be here engaged in the world. Yes, you should overcome temptations, but that's not the world. All right, the world is the good stuff just as much as it's the bad stuff. And you are supposed to resist the bad stuff. You shouldn't be doing heroin. It's terrible for you. But you should be finding love. It's wonderful for you. And so there is a balance to be stricken. These clubs don't tell you to strike the balance. They tell you to exclude things, right? You're not allowed to drink. You're going to go to hell. That's not true. That's not true in any fashion whatsoever. You shouldn't be a drunkard. You shouldn't be getting drunk every day. But you can have a little bit of alcohol. There's nothing wrong with that as long as you don't have a problem with alcohol, right? That would be your sin. If you have a problem with alcohol, that is your problem with alcohol, not the alcohol's problem with you. We're going to get back to the text, but I wanted to point this out because this is definitely telling you something straight out, right? These clubs may not be what you think they are, any of them. Back to the text. It is only a man who is putting his own search for wisdom entirely at the disposal of the condition of soul created by initiation who could thus speak of the mysteries. That is not true, right? I can speak of the mysteries. I can. I have at least achieved a depth level. I don't claim to be a master, but I definitely am an acolyte. I am definitely in the middle of doing this stuff, right? I have results from doing this stuff. But I wasn't initiated in any of these clubs. There was a club, right? The Order of Melchizedek. That was a spiritual experience. And while I place great value upon it, it doesn't have a lot of worldly value, right? That's why I don't talk about it all that often, right? I'm not here to recruit people into it. I cannot recruit people into it. That is an entirely spiritual experience that you have to find on your own. I cannot give that to you. I'm not here to initiate anyone. I'm here to spread knowledge, to give out the wisdom that I have found. I have done the things that these people want to do. And I was not initiated in the Masons. I wasn't initiated into the Rosicrucians. There's no great white brotherhood that came and sought me out. Right? I am here freely giving away the information. I say freely. You have to pay for the book. You have to pay for the membership, but it's not expensive. Right? There is a barrier, but that barrier is there quite intentionally. Right? If you can't spend $20 on a book, you don't want the knowledge. It really is that simple. There has to be some kind of a barrier for seeking it out. I did not have to go through any of these worldly initiations in order to speak of the mysteries because I sought it directly. I was a man putting my own search for wisdom entirely at the disposal of the condition of the soul without the initiation. And I can speak of the mysteries. Back to the text. And there is no doubt that a flood of light is poured on the words of the great Greek philosophers who, when we illustrate them from the mysteries. The relation of Heraclitus to Ephesus, 535 to 475 BC, to the mysteries is plainly given to us in a saying about him, to the effect that his thoughts were an impassable road, and that anyone entering upon them without being initiated found only dimness and darkness, but that, on the other hand, they were brighter than the sun for anyone who introduced to them by a mystic. And when it is said of his book that he deposited it in the temple of Artemis, this only means that initiates alone could understand him. Edmund Flylander has already collected the historical evidence for the relation of Heraclitus to the mysteries. See his book, Die Philosophie des Heraklit von Ephesus im Licht und dem Mysterende, Berlin of 1886. Heraclitus was called the Obscure because it was only through the mysteries that light could be thrown on his intuitive views. Now, these clubs have symbols, right? We have reviewed some of them, and they appear to be fairly universal, right? The phoenix, the double-headed eagle, the serpent being wisdom, right? There are some universals that if you don't understand, right, if it has not been explained to you, you're not going to get it. That does not mean that you cannot achieve the mystery without the knowledge of the symbology. The symbology can come later. Once you have the understanding that this is a real thing, then you see these symbols and you're like, okay, this was somebody that was at least trying to understand the same thing. Now, I don't place too much value into symbology in general, right? There are definitely lessons that can be learned from symbology, but it doesn't necessarily mean what we believe it means when we look back to the times of Heraclitus, because while there is some explanation of some of the symbology, for the most part it is us assuming that we understand because of things that we know now And that's not necessarily what they knew then, right? We see the double-headed eagle, we see the phoenix. That does not mean that that is what they intended when they did it. And so you have to take the mysteries, or the symbology of the mysteries, with a little bit of a grain of salt, because sometimes it may mean exactly what it is being indicated as, and sometimes it may not. It is entirely possible to not understand any of the symbology and still be able to achieve at least what I have done. Back to the text. Heraclitus comes before us as a man who took life with the greatest earnestness. We see plainly from his features, if we know how to reconstruct him, that he bore within him intimate knowledge which he knew that words could only indicate, not express. Out of such a temper of mind arose his celebrated utterance, "All things fleet away," which Plutarch explains thus: "We do not dip twice into the same wave, nor can we touch twice the same mortal being. For through abruptness and speed it disperses and brings together, not in succession, but simultaneously. You cannot walk through the same river twice because the water is different, you are different, and the body, the ground is different as well. And so it is not exactly the same, even if you walk through the exact same path." That's what that means. A man who thus thinks has penetrated the nature of transitory things, for he has felt compelled to characterize the essence of transitoriness into itself in the clearest terms. Such a description as this could not be given unless the transitory were being measured by the eternal, and in particular, it could not be extended to man without having seen his inner nature. Heraclitus has extended his characterization to man. "Life and death, waking and sleeping, youth and age are the same. This, in changing, is that, and that again this." In this sentence there is expressed full knowledge of the illusionary nature of the lower personality. See, there we go. Illusionary nature, right? And this is one of those things, right? I watched a guy yesterday, I'm not going to name him, but he was talking about how, because since tomorrow never gets here, that there is no destination. Now, I don't necessarily believe that, right? I believe that there are multiple destinations and that you are choosing your path as you go along. We describe that in quite intimate detail in other places. And so you are meant to learn lessons while you are here. You are fully incorporated here. You can, once you achieve a certain level, decide not to be incorporated here, but you probably won't once you get to that point. There is a certain level of temporariness to our incarnation. It could end right now. I could literally have a heart attack right now as I'm talking and die, right? You would never see the video, and so it would be wasted, but that is a possibility. This is transitory, but that doesn't mean that it is illusory. Yes, it is not permanent, but that doesn't mean that it is fake. It does not mean that this is a simulation, even though there can be different outcomes depending on the choices that you make. God has accounted for your different choices, and there is a whole theory behind that would take 20 to 30 minutes to explain, and if you were interested, it's in my book. And it's in the Esoterica playlist, and it's in the Infinite Integrations playlist, and it's probably scattered in some other places as well. You are not here in an illusion. It is transitory, but it is not fake. You are here with very real consequences for the decisions that you make, whether they are positive or negative. They are your decisions to make. When you make those decisions, you are choosing your timeline. When you choose your timeline, that is the direction you are going, and there is an end to that, but it is a selection of ends, right? If you choose to smoke, for instance, one of those is going to be cancer, right? One of those, the end points is going to be cancer. But in another one, it's heart disease. And in another one, it's emphysema. And in another one, it's bronchitis, right? And in another one, it never affects you at all, right? All of those are something. You have made the decision to continue smoking, and so you are on this path with one of these outcomes. Now, which one of those outcomes you get can vary depending on whether you choose to quit in a month or if you choose to continue smoking for the rest of your life. All of the choices that you make add up into which one of those particular slots that you go down. It is not illusory that those endings happen. It is not illusory that your birth happened. Both of those things are very real in this incarnation, which you are here at the direct express will of the Lord God Almighty, right? With no intermediaries necessary. You have direct access to source. You are here intentionally. That means that it is not a prison, right? Why would God just create you with one incarnation to almost certainly condemn you to a lake of fire, which is not even contained in the Old Testament source material, right? All of these things are what the control system has added to something that is true. Part of the control system is making you think that this is illusory, that you are in a simulation, that you are in a prison. That is the part that you have to break apart. If you want to achieve what I have achieved, you cannot see this world as a prison or a punishment. It is not. Intrinsically, it is not. Back to the text. In this sentence, there is expressed full knowledge of the illusory nature of the lower personality. He says, still more forcibly, life and death are found in our living, even as in our dying. What does this mean but that it is only a transient point of view when we value life more than death? Dying is to perish in order to make way for new life, but the eternal is living in the new life, as in the old. The same eternal appears in transitory life as in death. When we grasp this eternal, when we look upon life and death with the same feeling, life only has a special value when we have not been able to awaken the eternal within us. That is not true, right? I am fully aware that there is an eternal life after this one. I am not living for that eternal life, right? That is another one of those key things. If you are living your life now for a promised reward in the afterlife, then you are not engaging fully in this life. If you are living only for a promised reward, if you follow this set of rules precisely, you are not engaging in this life in the way that you are meant to. You are meant to overcome temptations. That is an absolute truth. But you know what those temptations are in your heart. You don't have to have them written out in some book. And most of the books are incorrect. We have talked about that in extreme detail in the Bible study. And so you do not have to, life does not only have a special value if you have awakened it, right? You can fully engage in life if you are not aware of the eternal. You should be fully engaged in your life. You should be taking steps to master here and not there, right? If you are giving away all that you get so that you can have rewards in heaven, you did not read your source material. Back to the text. The saying, all things fleet away, might be repeated 1,000 times, but unless said in this feeling, it is an empty sound. The knowledge of eternal growth is valueless if it does not detach us from temporal growth. Wrong. Wrong. It is, we dealt with it. It is the turning away from that love of life which impels towards the transitory, which Heraclitus indicates in his utterance. How can we say about daily life, we are, when from the standpoint of the eternal we know that we are and are not? See, that is not mutually exclusive. Just because there is eternal after does not mean that you are not meant to engage now. I mean, that is the part that it astounds me. It really does, that nobody else has come across this. Right? Life is about balance. It is not about exclusion. If you're living an ascetic life, which most of these people did, you're doing it wrong, right? If you are denying yourself meat because you think that makes you more of a spiritual person, you're wrong. It's just the intrinsic value of it, right? You are designed to eat meat. That's why your teeth are shaped the way that they are. You are also designed to eat plants, so you should be eating your vegetables and your meat. But neither one of those is going to condemn you to hell, right? You're not going to go to hell for smoking a cigarette or drinking some alcohol. You might have problems, and there is no hell, so you're not going to hell. But you might have problems in the afterlife that you didn't learn the lesson of resistance to smoking cigarettes or overusing alcohol, and then you get the option to repeat. You are not meant to exclude. You are meant to assimilate. Right? You're not meant to have sex with everyone. You are meant to have sex with probably just one person. Right? Some people are different. Some people are called to never have sex. That is exceedingly rare. And some people are called to have more than one partner. That is also exceedingly rare. It is probably not you. And so you are not going to go to hell. Right? That is not in the Old Testament at all. There is no reference whatsoever to hell being a punishment for souls in the Old Testament. There is no reference to heaven being the reward for souls in the Old Testament. It's just not there. It is in the New Testament. They pulled that out of whole cloth and decided that that was a thing. It was not in the Old Testament at all. Back to the text. Hades and Dionysos are one and the same, says one of the fragments. Dionysos, the god of joy and life, of germination and growth, to whom the Dionysiac festivals are dedicated, is, for Heraclitus, the same as Hades, the god of destruction and annihilation, only one who sees death and life and death, and in both the eternal, high above life and death, can view the merits and demerits of existence in the right light. Then, even imperfections become justified, for in them too lives the eternal. For what they are from the standpoint of the limited lower life, they are only in appearance. The gratification of men's wishes is not necessarily a happiness for them. That is true. Illness makes health sweet and good. Hunger makes food appreciated, and toil rest. The sea contains the purest and impurest water, drinkable and wholesome for fishes. It is undrinkable and injurious to human beings. Okay, where does the sea contain pure water? I'll wait. Nowheres, absolutely nowheres, not even where the inflows are from the rivers. That is not pure water. That contains all kinds of trace minerals, right? And so, while wisdom may seem like a thing, it's not always a thing, right? It is drinkable and wholesome for fishes. Okay, sure, because they are built differently. They are able to assimilate the salt and the various minerals in the sea. It is not pure, right? Here, Heraclitus is not primarily drawing attention to the transitoriness of earthly things, but to the splendor and majesty of the eternal. Heraclitus speaks vehemently against Homer and Hesiod and the learned men of his day. He wished to show up their way of thinking, which clings to the transitory only. He did not desire gods endowed with qualities taken from a perishable world, and he could not regard as a supreme science that science which investigates the growth and decay of things. For him, the eternal speaks out of the perishable, and for this eternal he has a profound symbol. The harmony of the world returns upon itself like that of the lyre and the bow. What depths are hidden in this image? None. Right? The harmony of the world returns upon itself like that of the lyre and the bow. And maybe that is because we don't have lyres in part of the common everyday parlance, right? Maybe that's talking about a violin, right? You play a violin with a bow. How is that the harmony of the world upon itself? Now, that doesn't mean that you can't strike harmony with a violin or a lyre, right? I was under the impression the lyre was a played instrument, like strummed, as opposed to the bow, but maybe it is. But harmony only occurs when there are two musical instruments, not one. You cannot make harmony with yourself unless you're using recording devices, right? You cannot just sing harmony to yourself. You cannot just play harmony to yourself. There has to be more people involved in order for harmony to come out of it. And so the harmony of the world returns upon itself like a group of players with lyres and bows? Maybe, right? But again, you don't produce harmony from yourself. By the pressing asunder of forces, and again by the harmonizing of these divergent forces, that implies more than one force, unity is attained. how one sound contradicts another, and yet together they produce harmony. Maybe this is talking about a lyre and a bow as two separate instruments. Maybe that's what it is. But again, I don't know what that bow would be, right? I don't know. If you know what the bow would be separate from the lyre, let me know. How one sound contradicts another, and yet together they produce harmony. It's got to be two different instruments. I thought it was talking about playing the lyre with the bow. So, if we apply this to the spiritual world, we have the thought of Heraclitus. Immortals are mortals, mortals immortal, living the death of mortals, dying the life of the immortals. That absolutely makes sense. It is man's original fault to direct his cognition to the transitory. Thereby, he turns away from the eternal, and life becomes a danger to him. What happens to him comes to him through life, but its events lose their sting if he ceases to set unconditioned value on life. In that case, his innocence is restored to him. It is as though he were, from the so-called seriousness of life, able to return to his childhood. The adult takes many things seriously with which a child merely plays, but one who really knows becomes like a child. Serious values lose their value looked at from the standpoint of eternity. Life, then, seems like a play. If so, you are doing it wrong, right? Your values do not lose value until you leave the plane, right? It doesn't lose its value for you to have honor. It doesn't lose its value for you to have bravery, right? Those are values. Those are serious values, and they do not lose any of their value until you leave. And then when you leave, you have stood in your values, and that is where your judgment in eternity comes from. And so, even in eternity, the values that you hold here don't lose their value. Back to the text. On this account, does Heraclitus say, eternity is a child at play, it is the reign of a child. Where does the original fault lie? In taking, with the utmost seriousness, what does not deserve to be so taken. God has poured himself into the universe of things. If we take these things and leave God unheeded, we take them in earnest as the tombs of God. We should play with them like a child, and should earnestly strive to awaken forth from them God, who sleeps spellbound within them. Contemplation of the eternal acts like a consuming fire on ordinary illusions about the nature of things. The spirit breaks up thoughts which come through the senses. It fuses them. This is the higher meaning of the Heraclitean thought, that fire is the primary element of all things. I also agree. This thought is certainly to be taken at first as an ordinary physical explanation of the phenomena of the universe. But no one understands Heraclitus who does not think of him in the same way as Philo, living in the early days of Christianity, thought of the laws of the Bible. There are people, he says, who take the written laws merely as symbols of spiritual teaching, who diligently search for the latter but despise the laws themselves. I can only blame such, for they should pay heed to both, to knowledge of the hidden meaning and to observing the obvious one. Now, he is talking about the early days of Christianity, and we're talking about the laws. And the laws were not good, right? There were some good ones. A few of them were actually worth having, right? The Ten Commandments, for instance, those are perfectly fine. The rest of the laws, however, have some severe problems in them, and if that is any bit confusing to you, I suggest the Bible study. I would particularly pay attention to Exodus and Leviticus, where we talk about those things in some extreme detail. But here's the example I use most often. If you are cold or need to cook your food on the Sabbath and you pick up sticks, it is not okay for somebody to hit you in the head with rocks until you stop breathing. Right? That was one of the laws. Another one of the laws is this one, and I use this one a lot too. If you were to commit sexual assault upon a woman, it's not wrong. You just have to pay her dad and marry her. Right? You took it by force, now you get it forever. That's how that works. That's part of the laws too. We have come up with a better commandment than God. We say, thou shalt not rape, or you will face severe punishment. That is one-upping the commandments of God. That is one-upping the law of God. That doesn't make any sense, does it? That is because, once again, the law was written by man, with the understanding of man, and many of the laws of the Jews was absolutely horrible. Absolutely horrible, with no consistency whatsoever. And if that is confusing to you, again, Exodus and Leviticus. Back to the text. If the question is discussed whether Heraclitus meant by fire, physical fire, or whether fire for him was only a symbol of eternal spirit which dissolves and reconstitutes all things, this is putting a wrong construction upon his thought, for he meant both, and neither of these things. For spirit was also alive for him in ordinary fire, and the force which is physically active in fire lives on a higher plane in the human soul, which melts in its crucible mere sense knowledge, so that out of the contemplation of the eternal may arise. Alright, so we talked about yesterday the Logos, right? You have God, the infinite. You have the Spirit, which is God, limited into creator. You have Logos, which is the Spirit in motion. The physical representation of the Logos is fire. It is quite literally changing from one thing into another. If I light this lighter on fire, right, this fire right here is burning butane and creating carbon dioxide. That is the process of change. That is the Logos in action. Right there. That is an example of it. Another example of it is lightning. The potential for lightning exists prior to the lightning bolt, but the lightning bolt is the example of the Logos changing things. It's turning water vapor into oxygen and hydrogen. It's transforming other elements into compounds. That is what lightning does. It is quite literally the electromagnetic emanations creating change. That is Logos. That is the physical representation of Logos is lightning and fire. It is also thought, it is communication, it is movement, it is heat. All of that is the Logos. Any instance of any of those is the Logos. And so when he is talking about fire, it is indeed physical fire and spiritual fire. It is indeed the symbol of the Logos. It is why the Zoroastrians are a fire cult. It is because that is the representation of change. That is the Logos. Incorporated in the only way that it can be. Transitory, not eternal, right? Fire is not eternal unless you have fuel available. It will eventually burn up the fuel. All right, back to the text. It is very easy to misunderstand Heraclitus. He makes strife the father of things, but only of things, not of the eternal. If there were no contradictions in the world, if the most multifarious interests were not opposing each other, the world of becoming, of transitory things, would not exist. That is true as well, right? We are here for the struggle. That is part of it. It's not a punishment. You are meant to overcome it. You are meant to meet your challenges, and sometimes that leads to the eternal, right? Not in a you're being rewarded, but that you're there, right? Sometimes you're no longer here. That is part of the struggle as well. You are not meant to be eternal. You are not meant to seek the eternal here, right, at all. Now, you're not meant to pump yourself so full of drugs that you extend your life past the point where you probably should have passed on, right? You should not be seeking to preserve your life to such an extreme that you never take any chances and experience the world. That is an imbalance. You are meant to balance, but there's no balance without challenge, right? It does you no good to stand if there is no gravity opposing you. That is an intrinsic part of the experience, is the troubles. We are here to learn. There is no knowledge without challenge. And so, yes. But what is revealed in this antagonism, what is poured forth into it, is not strife, but harmony. Just because there is strife in all things, the spirit of the wise should pass over them like a breath of fire and change them into harmony. At this point, there shines forth one of the great thoughts of Heraclitean wisdom. What is man as a personal being? From the above point of view, Heraclitus is able to answer. Man is composed of the conflicting elements into which divinity has poured itself. In this state, he finds himself, and beyond this, he becomes aware of the spirit within him, the spirit which is rooted in the eternal. But the spirit itself is born, for man, out of the conflict of elements. No. The spirit is the elements, right? The spirit is God limited into creation. It is quite literally every element in existence all at the exact same time. Now, the logos is the change of those elements, but the spirit is the elements existing. That moment that they change from the infinite God who is all things into the finite God who created all things, that instant of change held in stasis is the beginning, right? Every single instance of change of that spirit is the logos. And so the spirit and logos are intertwined inextricably. You cannot separate the two. Spirit and logos is quite literally all things changing with the movement of time. And so, spirit itself is not born for man out of the conflict of the elements, but instead is the conflict of the elements. And man is here as part of the spirit. Every single element inside of you, that's the spirit. Whenever you make a decision for your 5D navigation device, which is the temple of God, right, the body, when you make a decision, the soul, which is the individualized piece of God, which is you don't make it happen. When I say I want to wiggle my fingers, another example I use all the time, when I say I want to wiggle my fingers, I don't make that happen. The soul doesn't make that happen. I make the decision, and then the spirit carries it out. I decide I want to wiggle my fingers, and then an electrical signal, the spirit, remember electricity, the lightning strike, the logos, it goes and it sends the signal to my fingers, and that signal moves the body. I make the decision, the spirit makes it happen. That is intrinsic to the experience. You are part of the spirit, and therefore the spirit cannot be born out of you, right? It is not relative to you, it is relative to existence. And so while it is the conflict of the elements, right, it's not really born. Back to the text. But the spirit itself is born, for man, out of the conflict of elements, and it is the first which has to calm them. In man, nature surpasses her natural limits. It is indeed the same. That is not true. Nature... How? How does nature surpass its limits? It doesn't even make sense. If there are limits created by God, then you cannot surpass them. And if it happens in the natural world, then it is not beyond the natural limits. That whole statement makes no sense. It is, indeed, the same universal force which created antagonism and the mixture of elements which is afterwards, by its wisdom, to do away with the conflict. It is indeed the same universal force which created antagonism and the mixture of elements. But there will always be some conflict as long as you are here. Here, we arrive at the eternal dualism which lives in man, the perpetual antagonism between the temporal and the eternal. Through the eternal, he has become something quite definite, and out of this, he is to create something higher. He is both dependent and independent. He can only participate in the eternal spirit whom he contemplates, in the measure of the compound of elements which that eternal spirit has affected within him. And it is just on this account that he is called upon to fashion the eternal out of the temporal. The spirit works within him, but works in a special way. It works out of the temporal. It is the peculiarity of the human soul that a temporal thing should be able to work like an eternal one, should grow and increase in power like an eternal thing. This is why the soul is at once like a god and a worm. Man, owing to this, stands in a mid-position between God and animals. The growing and increasing force within him is his demonic element, that within him which pushes out beyond himself. Man's demon is his destiny. That is because the demon, if you are doing it correctly, is your intuition and not an external being. Thus, strikingly, does Heraclitus make reference to this fact. He extends man's vital essence far beyond the personal. The personality is the vehicle of the demon, which is not confined within the limit of the personality, and for which the birth and death of the personality are of no importance. What is the relation of the demonic element to the personality which comes and goes? The personality is only a form for the manifestation of the demon. I do not agree with that at all. One who has arrived at this knowledge looks beyond himself, backwards and forwards. The demonic experiences through which he has passed are enough to prove to him his own immortality. He can no longer limit his demon to the one function of occupying his personality, for the latter can only be one of the forms in which the demon is manifested. The demon cannot be shut up within one personality. He has the power to animate many. He is able to transform himself from one personality into another. The great thought of reincarnation springs as a matter of course from the Heraclitean premises, and not only the thought but experience of the fact. That's only kind of true because it existed separately and independently from Heraclitus. Right? The entirety of the Far East believed in reincarnation, completely separate from Heraclitus. And so while in the Heraclitean it springs from it, does not it didn't in the general idea, but not necessarily attributed exclusively to him. Okay, as a matter of course from the Heraclitean premises, and not only the thought but the experience of the fact. The thought only paves the way for the experience. Now that is true, right? The direction that you place your mind is the direction that you are going. So if you're looking for the good things, you are going to go in the direction of the good things. If you're looking for the bad things, you're going to go in the direction of the bad things. You will go where you focus. So the thought does indeed pave the way for the experience in its entirety. That's why I stress so hard that this is not a prison. One who becomes conscious of the demonic element within him does not recognize it as innocent and in its first stage. He finds that it has qualities. Whence do they come? Why have I certain natural aptitudes? Because others have already worked upon my demon, or it's just your type. And what becomes of the work which I accomplish in the demon, if I am not to assume that its task ends with my personality? I am working for a future personality. See, now, between me and the spirit of the universe, something interposes which reaches beyond me, but is not yet the same as divinity. This something is my demon. I do not give any credit whatsoever to an external influence. Right? The things that I have done have been without the demon. Now, if you are looking at demon as intuition, then yes. But that is not a separate thing, and it is not necessarily working for anyone else. There are forces. You can align yourself with them. You can even give away possession of your vessel to them. But it's not a wise idea, right? Your intuition is completely different than a demon. My today is only the product of yesterday. My tomorrow will be the product of today. In the same way, my life is a result of a former and will be the foundation of a future one. And while that is true, that is not the way to look at it, right? You are here to learn lessons while you are here. Don't look at it as, if I fail this lesson, I'm going to have to come back, right? If you're looking at it that way, you're looking at it as something intrinsically wrong, right? You are meant to have experiences. You're meant to find the positive in all of your experiences, no matter how terrible they may be. You are meant to find the lessons that you are here to learn, no matter how terrible they may be. It is not about the next life. It is about achieving the things that you are placed here to achieve in this life. This is the life that you have to worry about. Not the one that came before, not the one that's coming next. This one. Just as a mortal man looks back to innumerable yesterdays and forward to many tomorrows, so does the soul of a sage look upon many lives in his past and many in the future. And while it is okay, right, it is okay to speculate about these things. It is not okay to dwell upon them, right? If you are spending your day worrying about that all day, you're doing it wrong. Whether that is the next incarnation, or whether that is heaven, or whether that is hell, or whatever it happens to be. If you are spending all of your time concerned about that, then you're doing it wrong. You're supposed to be concerned with this. It is perfectly fine to look back and try to see where the experiences may have come from. It is perfectly fine to look and see where they may lead to, even outside of the current incarnation. But it should not be your dwelling place. You should not be investing your energy in there greatly. You should be looking for the lessons here so that you can overcome your trials here. The thoughts and aptitudes I acquired yesterday, I am using today. It is not the same with life. Do not people enter upon the horizon of existence with the most diverse capacities? Whence this difference? Does it proceed from nothing? No, it is part of the fucking lesson. One of the things that I do over here, or have done over here, is dive quite deeply into how people think, right? Whence this difference? I've got a whole playlist about that. As a matter of fact, the Infinite Integrations playlist contains the entirety of the MBTI parts playlist, which deals extensively on why people think differently. I have at least an answer. It may not be the answer, but it works. And it works in a self-improvement type of situation. It is what I used to get to where I am. It is there, freely available, or you can buy my book. Again, it is there in the book, right? That is why, right? I am an INFJ. I think about ideas, about what is the best idea all day long. It is intrinsically part of who I am. If I hear a new idea, I compare it to the knowledge that I have and see if it fits, right? It has to fit in the box. Somebody who is an ESFP, for instance, is going to look at life completely different. I'm about ideas. They're about things. I'm about the best. They're about the new. I'm about flexibility. Did I say F or T? I meant to say T. T is about control, right? It is completely opposite ways of looking at things. That's the reason. That's the difference. Because my experience is going to be different from your experience. My type is INFJ. Even another INFJ is going to focus on different things, right? My main concern is religion. My main concern is indeed the eternal. Now, I embrace here. And I fit all of the things into what are we supposed to be doing here in service to the divine. Somebody else's box can be completely different. They fit all of their ideas into something that is not the same as what I do. That is part of the lesson, right? I focus on this. You focus on that. Both of those are equally valid focuses. Part of the problem with our education system is that they do not recognize that fact. People think in different ways. They focus on different things, and therefore they have different learning styles. It's a problem with our education system. Back to the text. Our natural sciences take much credit to themselves for having banished miracle from our views of organic life. David Frederick Strauss, in his Altere Nur Glube, considers it a great achievement of our day that we no longer think that a perfect organic being is a miracle issuing from nothing. We understand its perfection when we are able to explain it as a development from imperfection. The structure of the ape is no longer a miracle if we assume its ancestors to have been primitive fishes which have been gradually transformed. Let us at least submit to accept as reasonable in the domain of spirit what seems to us to be right in the domain of nature. Is the perfect spirit to have the same antecedents as the imperfect one? Does a Gothe have the same antecedents as any Hottentot? The antecedents of an ape are as unlike those of a fish as are the antecedents of Gothe's mind, unlike those from a savage. The spiritual ancestry of Gothe's soul is a different one from that of the savage soul. They have different lessons. The soul has grown as well as the body. The demon in Gothe has more progenitors than the one in the savage. Let us take the doctrine of reincarnation in this sense, and we shall no longer find it unscientific. We shall be able to explain in the right way what we find in our souls, and we shall not take what we find as if created by a miracle. If I can write, it is owing to the fact that I learned to write. No one who has a pen in his hand for the first time can sit down and write offhand. But one who has come into the world with the stamp of genius, must he owe it to a miracle? No, even the stamp of genius must be acquired. It must have been learned. And when it appears in a person, we call it a demon. This demon, too, must have been to school. This demon, too, must have been to school. It acquired in a former life what it puts into force in a later one. That plays into the theory of spiritual evolution, which is part of the Infinite Integrations playlist if you are interested. In this form, and this form only, did the thought of eternity pass before the mind of Heraclitus and other Greek sages. There was no question with them of a continuance of the immediate personality after death. Compare some verses of Empedocles. He says of those who accept the data of experiences as miracles. Foolish and ignorant they, who do not reach far with their thinking, who suppose that what has not existed can come into being, or that something may die away wholly and vanish completely. Impossible is it that any beginning can come from not being. Quite impossible also that being can fade into nothing. For wherever a being is driven, there it will continue to be. Never will any believe who has been in these matters instructed, that spirits of men only live while what is called life here endures, that only so long as they live, receiving their joys and their sorrows, but that ere they were born here, and when they are dead, they are nothing. The Greek sage did not even raise the question whether there was an eternal part in man, but only inquired in what this eternal element consisted, and how man can flourish and can nourish and cherish it in himself. For, from the outset, it is clear to him that man is an intermediate creation between the earth and divine. It was not a question of a divine being outside and beyond the world. The divine lives in man, but lives in him only in a human way. It is the force urging man to make himself ever more and more divine. Only one who thinks thus can say with Empedocles, "When leaving thy body behind thee, thou soarest into the ether, then thou becomest a god, immortal, not subject to death." What may be done for a human life from this point of view? It may be introduced into the magic circle of the eternal. For in man there must be forces which merely natural life does not develop, and the life might pass away unused if the forces remain idle. To open them up, thereby to make man like the divine, this was the task of the mysteries, and this was also the mission which the Greek sages set before themselves. In this way we can understand Plato's utterance, that he who passes unsanctified and uninitiated into the world below will lie in a slough, but that he who arrives there after initiation and purification will dwell with the gods. We have to do here with the conception of immortality, the significance of which lies bound up with the universe. Everything which man undertakes in order to awaken the eternal within him, he does in order to raise the value of the world's existence. The fresh knowledge he gains does not make him an idle spectator of the universe, forming images for himself of what would be there just as much as if he did not exist. The force of his knowledge is a higher one. It is one of the creative forces of nature. What flashes up within him spiritually is something divine which was previously under a spell, and which, failing the knowledge which he has gained, must have lain fallow and waited for some other exorcist. Thus, a human personality does not live in and for itself, but for the world. Life extends far beyond individual existence, when looked at in this way. From within such a point of view, we can understand utterances like that of Pindar, giving a vista of the eternal. Happy is he who has seen the mysteries and then descends unto the hollow earth. He knows the end of life, and he knows the beginning, promised by Zeus. We understand the proud traits and solitary nature of sages such as Heraclitus. They were able to say proudly of themselves that much had been revealed to them, for they did not attribute their knowledge to their transitory personality, but to the eternal demon within them. Their pride had a necessary adjunct to the stamp of humility and modesty expressed in the words, "All knowledge of perishable things is in perpetual flux, like the things themselves." Heraclitus calls the eternal universe a play. He could also call it the most serious of realities. But the word earnest has lost its force through being applied to earthly experiences. On the other hand, the realization of the play of the eternal leaves man that security in life which he is deprived by that earnest which has come out of transitory things. A different conception of the universe from that of Heraclitus grew up on the basis of the mysteries, and the community founded by Pythagoras in the 6th century BC in southern Italy. The Pythagoreans saw the basis of things in the numbers and geometrical figures of which they investigated the laws by means of mathematics. Aristotle says of them, "They first studied mathematics, and quite engrossed in them, they considered the elements of mathematics to be the elements of all things. Now as numbers are naturally the first thing in mathematics, and they thought they saw many resemblances in numbers to things and to development, and certainly more in numbers than in fire, earth, and water. In this way, one quality of numbers came to mean, for them, justice, another, the soul and spirit, another, time, and so on with all the rest. Moreover, they found in numbers the qualities and connections of harmony, and thus everything else, in accordance with its whole nature, seemed to be an image of numbers, and numbers seemed to be the first thing in nature." The mathematical and scientific study of natural phenomena must always lead to a certain Pythagorean habit of thought. When a string of a certain length is struck, a particular sound is produced. If the string is shortened in certain numeric proportions, other sounds will be produced. The pitch of the sounds may be expressed in figures. Physics also expresses color relations in figures. When two bodies combine into one substance, it always happens that a certain definite quantity of the one body, expressible in numbers, combines with a certain definite quantity of the other. The Pythagorean sense of observation was directed to such arrangements of measures and numbers in nature. Geometrical figures also play a similar role. Astronomy, for instance, is mathematics applied to the heavenly bodies. One fact became important to the thought life of the Pythagoreans. This was that man, quite alone and purely through his mental activity, discovers the law of numbers and figures, and yet that when he looks abroad into nature, he finds that things are obeying the same laws which he has ascertained for himself in his own mind. Man forms the idea of an ellipse and ascertains the law of ellipses, and the heavenly bodies move according to the laws which he has established. It is not, of course, a question here of the astronomical views of the Pythagoreans. What may be said about these may equally be said of Copernican views and the connection now being dealt with. Hence, it follows as a direct consequence that the achievements of the human soul are not an activity apart from the rest of the world, but that in those achievements the cosmic laws are expressed. The Pythagoreans said, "The senses show man physical phenomena, but they do not show the harmonious order which these things follow. The human mind must first find that harmonious order within itself if it wishes to behold it in the outer world. The deeper meaning of the world, that which bears sway within it as an eternal, law-obeying necessity, this makes its appearance in the human soul and becomes a present reality there. The meaning of the universe is revealed in the soul. This meaning is not to be found in what we see, hear, and touch, but in what the soul brings up to the light from its own unseen depths. The eternal laws are thus hidden in the depths of the soul. If we descend there, we shall find the eternal. God, the eternal harmony of the world, is in the human soul. The soul element is not limited to the bodily substance which is enclosed within the skin, for what is born in the soul is nothing less than the laws by which the world revolves in celestial space. The soul is not in the personality. The personality only serves as the organ through which the order pervades cosmic space may express itself. There is something of the spirit of Pythagoras in what one of the fathers, Gregory of Nyssa, said. It is said that human nature is something small and limited, and that God is infinite, and it is asked, how the finite can embrace the infinite? But who dares to say that the infinity of the Godhead is limited by the boundary of the flesh, as though by a vessel? For not even during our lifetime is the spiritual nature confined within the boundaries of the flesh. That is true. The mass of the body, it is true, is limited by neighboring parts, but the soul reaches out freely into the whole of creation by the movements of thought. The soul is not the personality. The soul belongs to infinity. And this I vehemently disagree with, right? The soul is the individualized piece of God which is given to this, or given this vessel to navigate 5D space through the use of the Spirit. It is, indeed, the personality. It is you. You are the soul. The soul and you are the same. It is, quite literally, your personality here on the planet. Now, that can change, right? Your personality can change over time. It is not firmly affixed. The soul does belong to infinity. However, that is true, right? Before you are incarnated in this vessel, you are somewhere. When you leave this vessel, your soul will go somewhere. That is infinite, right? But your personality is who your soul is in this incarnation. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of what the soul and personality definitions are. From such a point of view, the Pythagoreans must have considered that only fools could imagine the soul force to be exhausted with the personality. Now, I'm not saying that when your personality goes away, that the soul goes away too, right? It goes somewhere, but it is not dissolved. For them, too, as for Heraclitus, the essential point was the awakening of the eternal in the personal. Knowledge, for them, meant intercourse with the eternal. The more man brought the eternal element within him into existence, the greater must he necessarily seem to the Pythagoreans. Life in their community consisted in holding intercourse with the eternal. The object of the Pythagorean education was to lead the members of the community to that intercourse. The education was therefore a philosophical initiation, and the Pythagoreans might well say that by their manner of life they were aiming at a goal similar to that of the cult of the mysteries. And that is going to bring us to the end of chapter 3. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult series of topics. I understand I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. I am here to help clarify spiritual matters. You don't have to believe me, right? I'm not here to convince you. I am here to tell you. There are things that are true. You don't have to believe them, right? I can tell you that the sun is going to rise in the east tomorrow. You don't have to believe that. You can believe that the end of the world is tomorrow. It doesn't change the fact, right? Now, all of the things that I talk about, I maintain as speculation because they are relevant to me. The things that I have done, I believe they have happened, right? The miracles that I have performed upon myself through the use of the Holy Spirit at the direct express will of God, right? That is real, right? The cyst is gone. My shoulder is healed. My back is healing. My leg is doing wonderful, right? I'm ahead of schedule on my leg. All of these things, I fully believe happened. None of them were instant. They were not flashy with some, all of a sudden, it is perfect. No, it is a gradual progression over time. Some of it was led by intuition, right? Some of it was purely miraculous, like the cyst disappearing from my throat. That happened like that. That was almost instantaneous, right? I made a decision, to walk this particular path, the one that I am here relaying to you. When I made that decision the next day, right, like the next morning, the thing in my throat ruptured and was gone. It was gone forever. It has not appeared. It is gone, right? That happened like that from the decision that I made. The healing in my back, the healing in my shoulder, that came through meditative practices, slowly, over time. Some of it, again, was intuition, right? Like beginning to exercise 5 years ago when it was extremely difficult, right? If you don't know my story, I was in a car wreck and severely injured. 13 discs, 7 bulges, 6 herniations, 3 spinal impingements. When I walked in with assistance, when I walked into my Social Security disability hearing, the doctor was like, I don't know how that man walked in here, right? I was not supposed to be able to walk due to the severity of my injuries. Through this, through the meditative practices, through listening to my intuition, not a demon, but my intuition, I have begun the process of healing myself. It was still exceedingly difficult, right? I had a lot of problems. Again, up until the day I decided to do this. On the day I decided to walk this path, the pain started lessening. I started being able to do more that day. But it was not a healing of the same nature as my throat where it went away. It has taken me 5 years of walking to get to the point where I was able to start running, and then I got my leg broken, and I'm in a bit of a setback on that, but all things in divine timing. All of that to say, I am here to try to express to you the method by which I have attained this in different ways, right? This video is going to reach an entirely different audience in some ways than the one yesterday, or the one tomorrow, or the one 6 months ago. And so we reiterate some of these things, even though I really do not like repeating myself, because it is trying to help someone else come to the realization that the control systems are not for you. They do not help you to achieve what you want to achieve. They do not help you to get to the goal that you want for your life. If you want to do that, I have some toolboxes. They are linked in the corner above and the box down below to help you get where you want to be. But you don't have to listen. You don't have to pick it up. You don't have to put it into practice. But if you do, it will change your life. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree with anything that was said. Put it in the box down below. And if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me read or discuss in the way that we are doing here, drop that in the box as well. And if you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or pick up a copy of my book. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.